we are here today to discuss a world of rainbows and unicorns where a practical, effective quantum computer has actually been invented. So this will present us with probably one of the biggest existential questions or debates that's ever happened in this space. What do we do with all the old pay-to-public key coins that have no hash defense, no protection? The public key is right there. And if a practical quantum computer is ever invented, it can just start grinding and finding those private keys and stealing those coins. So Hunter here is going to be taking the position of we do absolutely nothing. The market will sort things out. Mike is going to be arguing for the Hourglass proposal that him and Hunter have put together to effectively rate limit how fast these coins can be spent to try to mitigate the market damage. And Isabel is going to be arguing in favor of just completely confiscating or burning all of the coins completely. So I guess we're gonna go from Hunter down to Isabel, and each of you take a little bit to kind of lay the foundations of your argument.
Yeah, so I think one argument for liquidation is in the original Bitcoin client, public key hash addresses did exist, but they were only used for receiving payments. They weren't necessarily used for mining rewards. And so there's a possibility that Satoshi understood that elliptic cryptography could be broken by quantum computers. This was something that most cryptographers were aware of, even in as soon as 2000. And he may have had a sense that people who were mining Bitcoin early on didn't always appreciate how valuable it would become. And so he may have decided to do that because he would think, these coins should be returned to the supply once quantum computers are good enough, and then he originally chose 21 million and as Bitcoin supply, and I think that it's fine for Bitcoin to be everything over 21 million, not like everything over 21 million minus some fraction of lost coins. So there's to give you guys a sense of the scope of the issue, though, is there's 1.7 million P2PK coins. They're spread out over 34,000 addresses. They have an average balance of 50 Bitcoin each because that was the original block reward in when Bitcoin was first launched. And so they're not all in like one address of Satoshi's or something. They're spread out. And so quantum computers would have to work a lot harder to get these. It wouldn't be free. And quantum computers are also very expensive to build and operate. And so there's also a chance that it might not even be economical to get these for a long time. So if they do improve to the point where it does become economical, then there's also a chance that Bitcoin's market cap is in the many multiples of trillions, and the markets can absorb the additional supply depending on the rate of which it happens. But the thing is, there's a lot of chance.
Hey Hunter, we're still on position statement.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah.
There is no containing Hunter, but do you want to finish that thought and let Mike rip from there?
Yeah. Hopefully that was valuable information for our understanding the scope of the problem.
Well, Mike?
I'm actually going to pass, so.
I was going to say, I can just really, really quickly give super one sentence overall, kind of the pro-burn point of view here. Specifically with P2PK coins potentially being burned by soft fork, I think that the kind of broad overview argument here is that 1.8 Bitcoin hitting the market would be an absolutely destructive economic event for Bitcoin. If you also want to potentially add on all the other quantum vulnerable coins coming from things like reused addresses, you're talking about 6.7 million Bitcoin that would be potentially liquidated in like a matter of moments. Bitcoin wouldn't survive that. It would be a complete failure of the project. Of course, we like to assume that hopefully, the code base will be upgraded before a quantum computer arrives. And, in that situation, most of the Bitcoin in reused addresses, at least, would move to post-quantum secure addresses, which would mean that, maybe the number of vulnerable coins would be closer to something like 2 or 3 million. Even 2 or 3 million, we're talking about like a sixth of the entire supply of the monetary policy, just like literally potentially hitting the market in a matter of moments. It's certain death for Bitcoin. And so even people like Peter Willa and some of like the most important technical leaders in this space broadly generally agree that burning these coins, at least the PTPK coins, that 1.8 in those very, very early addresses that are largely deemed abandoned, by the way, right? Like we don't generally come to the consensus that Satoshi is coming back and will move those coins to post-quantum addresses. That seems incredibly unlikely. It is the prudent thing to literally save this project. Those coins probably must be burned, or in the event, in this rainbows and unicorns event, that a quantum computer arrives, this project could be functionally dead. So that is the pro-burn argument in a nutshell.
All right, if Mike, if you have nothing to say,
No. I intentionally sat between them because, and I wanted them both to explain, first the liquidation, which is do nothing, Bitcoin is Bitcoin, anarchy for all, not your keys, not your coins, and whoever gets the keys, best of luck, right? And then the other side, of course, is confiscation, is we must destroy Satoshi's keys. He doesn't need them. He doesn't want them. He hasn't interacted with them. They're a danger. They're radioactive to the rest of us, right? So I'm here with a kind of a middle ground compromise solution that it's important to understand both of the position, both the confiscation, freezing, burning, and the liquidation, just let the world burn. Fair characterization?
Yeah. I'd like to respond to Isabel.
Okay, let me just finish just explaining what Hourglass is really briefly. I'll be quick, right? So as a middle ground solution, what Hourglass is it would be a soft fork rule to say only once per block can we consume one of these UTXOs. So one of the paid to public P2PK UTXOs. So that means if Satoshi's still around and decides to actually spend their coin, they can do that but they can only do it one at a time. So instead of confiscation or do nothing, it's restriction. So it's restricting the coin spending so they cannot be spent all at once. This would take it from potentially, we did the math, if somebody pre-cracked all of the 1.7 million Bitcoin's worth of keys, they could move them in about 3 hours worth of block space. Now, Hourglass, implemented as I described it, stretches that out to 8 months, which importantly gives us as a community time to react should we see those things start to move.
all right.
Thank you.
I want to pick on all three of you in turn now.
Nice.
Okay, so let's start with Mike.
Nice.
What is fundamentally different in the Hourglass approach from the confiscation approach when at the end of the day, you are rate limiting and throttling how fast this can happen to kind of cushion the harm to the ecosystem. But at the end of the day, you are creating kind of a zero-sum competition if there are more than one actors with access to a quantum computer that will effectively burn that money, even if the genuine owner does have like the ability to participate in that RBF race. Like it still will incentivize, game theoretically, that money being burned to mining fees.
Correct. So, and to fully elaborate Satoshi's point, what will happen if there's only one quantum attacker? then they will just sit there and they will attack as much as they can. But if this technology cannot be held by one entity because, others will, first thing, this will actually give us, we will know that this is going on, and it changes the incentives a little bit rather than sit there. If this is enacted, rather than sitting there and pre-mining the entirety of the set before you show any transactions, your incentive is now to start right away so that if there is somebody else with that capability, you show your hand and they will show their hand as well, because now you're in competition for these coins. But also the beautiful part about this, in my opinion, some others may say this, it's a gimme to the miners, is once they enter in competition with each other, if there's not just one quantum miner, dealer, thief, whatever, they have to have these mined. And if Hourglass is in place, you now have a scarce resource, which is throughput for these. So now they have to start competing against each other. And they have to start actually spending money paying miners to actually, because they have no idea which miner is going to win a given block, so they can't really make a deal ahead of time, right? So they're going to have to compete with each other for this block space, and they're going to drive most of the fees that they're earning from theft directly to the miners of Bitcoin. So, yeah.
All right, I guess we'll pick on Hunter next. So, given what Bitcoin is, like something that is essentially challenging the core power of nation states and the influential elite who pull the strings in the world, does doing nothing kind of just give them a perfect attack vector on Bitcoin in a world with quantum computing to be able to amass such a massive portion of the total supply and then use that to disrupt things, like play games, distorting mining incentives, like suppress the price, consume block space so that it's unusable for other users, like just doing nothing in this situation kind of opens up all of these attack vectors when many people all over the world who would probably be the type of people to get access to a quantum computer would have a massive incentive to engage in all of that.
Well, I could see that happening. The thing, though, is that Bitcoin has rules built into it, into the protocol, that do restrict the problem space quite a bit. That, these shenanigans can happen, but they can only happen for so long until the coins land in the hands of people who just want to hodl. And so, like, we've heard, for example, like, often... One of the things people would say often about Bitcoin is that it's just going to go to zero. And the argument against Bitcoin going to zero is that if it does go to zero or close to zero, then like people would just buy as much Bitcoin as they could for as cheap as they could. And so it would wind up in the hands of people with more conviction. And so it would also, like this event that we're talking about is really just like a one-time thing. And so once it's over, then the coins wind up in the hands of people with more conviction, more contango or whatever, and then it's done, and we're past it, and then nature can heal. So that's just my perspective.
All right, now it's your turn, Isabel. If such an event were to occur, and more than double-digit percentage of coin supplies were to get in the hands of an attacker like this, how would they actually dump those or affect the price in any way? Like any material platform where those could be traded at serious volume are all legally regulated entities. They're massive exchanges, the ETFs. Like, where could the attacker actually take those coins to dispose of them in a way that would impact the price rather than be completely over the counter and just not have any effect on those markets?
Yeah, I mean, so I agree that like major, American regulated exchanges will not list those coins and will not get involved with the situation. But there are hundreds of exchanges all over the world that don't have to abide by such regulations, and there will be an enormous incentive for those exchanges to list even these blacklisted tokens. It is very possible. I think what's the more likely situation is that these sort of Satoshi coins, these blacklisted Satoshi coins, will trade at a discount because they will be harder to trade. But doesn't really matter. I mean, there's still going to be a market for them at some price. And when you steal, 3 billion Bitcoin or whatever, you don't really care if you're selling at a 90% loss because 90% of 3 billion Bitcoin is certainly still an enormous amount of money. So yeah, I just don't see that as like a credible argument.
And also in support of Isabel's point, also if there's like Bitcoin native DeFi solutions built, then there's no way to regulate that either. It's a permissionless network, so yeah.
All right, well, here's a question for all three of you, and kind of jump in and answer how you want. What risk do you see of an event like this essentially causing a permanent chain split? Like, this is an incredibly contentious idea, situation, and like, what do we do about this? Like,
I think if not handled correctly, one way or the other, it could, with a liquidation or a confiscation, there is a risk of a chain split. Because if people are anti-confiscation, then, they may fork off. We could be looking at another hard fork. If they're anti-liquidation and they say, hey, those markets are collapsing, the value of this token's gone to shit, we want to roll back the clock. I think both of those pose a risk of a fork.
I don't think it's a risk. I think it's a certainty. I think that there is 100% certainty that we will absolutely see a fork in the event of any disagreement about how to handle this, in the event that, there's a consensus that we don't do anything other than burn. There will be a fork, and the economic nodes, who we know the miners ultimately will follow by like a long history of, it's a very obvious thing, right? Like the money is going to follow the pro-burn fork, so why would we even let that happen? It's like literally a certainty that this is how this is going to play out. So we might as well just like do the right thing and like all agree that burning is the correct thing to do to avoid that insane shit show in advance, which is, again, almost a certainty.
And we have to remember that like Bitcoin miners are crypto-economically incentivized, like they have to be paid to, and so there will be, if there's a reduction in the price in economic nodes, then there will be a reduction in network security as a result of miner capitulation. Because the hash rate would take a dive.
Yeah, talk about miner centralization, right? If the price of Bitcoin goes to 95% and every miner in the world is paying their, oil bills in dollars, you're talking about, maybe 2 or 3 miners on the planet who can even survive this.
I personally think this is a fundamental, just a flaw of calculation of individual holders, because everybody has written off and discounted Satoshi's coins as being out of the equation. Satoshi disappeared 15 years ago? Chances are they're not even dead. They probably have their keys. One thing I would like to say that is a risk of the confiscation argument, right? If people are worried that we're actually, if we see these coins move all at once, we're going to get panicked that the market's going to get flooded with sell orders. Well, the interesting part about any Flag Day confiscation attempt is if you actually announce the attempt, Satoshi could be sitting there watching and has not moved his coins the entire time because he doesn't have to. Because they are there, they're safe. If you tell him now we're going to take possession of all these, or just confiscate them, redistribute them, whatever, or freeze them, burn them, whatever, and you're going to do that, well, Satoshi may act, and you may get the very crisis that you're trying to prevent. And that's a risk.
It's potential, or it's possible that somebody even besides Satoshi could simply move coins after a while for a reason. Like we have no definitive proof of what coins are Satoshis. We have assumptions based on statistical analysis of historical blocks.
If Satoshi did come back and move his, quantum insecure coins, I actually don't think that would be the worst possible outcome, though, because then theoretically he would be moving them to an address and not planning on throwing them on exchanges, right?
Well, who says any quantum attacker would do that? If you had the biggest single pot of the single most valuable resource in the world, why would you crash that asset? It doesn't make sense.
The rational thing to do as a market participant is to
then why aren't we worried about Saylor? He could do the same thing.
Yeah, but Saylor has a fiduciary responsibility to stockholders.
Yeah, but if he could short Bitcoin at the top, he would be doing baller.
Also, this person got that shit for free, so this person doesn't care about selling at a 90%
Not
loss.
for free.
There is a large R&D cost to actually creating.
Agreed, fair, but still, the economic incentive leans towards liquidating at least a portion of those assets.
But is that true in a world where Bitcoin has become so valuable that becomes the primary attack target for a quantum computer?
And I would also like to interject, if you're saying a portion of those assets, Hourglass works great.
We do have to remember, though, that like both of these, either of these proposals are soft forks, and there's a hazard in like we can't just activate a soft fork overnight. That's just not how we've ever done a soft fork activation, and it takes 3-6 months, maybe even longer, depending on and that's a lot of time for someone to cook up shenanigans or actually trigger one of these nightmare scenarios we're talking about. And also, every soft fork has a risk of a hard fork, because if there's not enough adoption, if the community isn't convinced of these existential threats, and there's just not enough incentive or demand for it, then there will be a chain split.
Yeah, if we do
in
not...
the event of liquidation, though, you're also going to have some people who fork to burn. Like in any of these scenarios, the fork outcome is almost certain, right? So it's like the do nothing scenario, you're still going to have people who want to fork. So, I mean, you just can't avoid a fork in this situation.
So the question is, in the event of a fork, which one's Bitcoin?
Well, and also we have to remember...
Well, and guess what the exchanges are going to choose? They're going to choose the economically viable option, which is the one with the lowest supply.
Well, here's kind of an ethical question when it comes to all of these discussions around locking these coins or preventing, their theft. Is that really our ethical responsibility? Like, these users have chosen to engage in poor security practices, reusing addresses, and massive exchanges are actually one of the biggest culprits in that.
So this is one of my biggest arguments for Hourglass, is what it does is it provides them a quasi-legitimated path, an attack vector that the network has willingly said, hey, we accept there is quantum risk in here. So they're not going to go after the coins that exchanges own and try to steal those, because those are traceable. I mean, does anybody remember Rosalcon? They stole how many Bitcoins, and how many they get to spend? None. Right? So they're not going to want to steal Bitcoin from anywhere that they can, but if it's been sanctioned, hey, from this P2PK spot, they'll try to mine those first, which will give us a heads up. Hey, change your shit. Stop reusing addresses. Exchanges, you're at risk, And that's the biggest argument, versus if we do nothing and just let them do it, then they'll just round all the keys, do it all at once.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think P2PK coins / Satoshi's coins are like the low-hanging fruit and are most likely to be stolen, at least at first. I do think it's important, just to kind of answer your question, that I'm not particularly concerned about the person who has been practicing poor wallet hygiene and as a result maybe loses their Bitcoin because their public keys are exposed. Although I have sympathy for that person, I'm not necessarily trying to protect that person at all costs. I'm much more concerned about the entire market. Every single Bitcoin holder would be affected by 6.7 million coins all of a sudden being at risk of liquidation. Like, that is a global mass Bitcoin community destruction. It is not something that only affects people who happen to have their Bitcoin in quantum vulnerable addresses.
I mean, one argument that could be made against that is just, raise your hand if you think you don't have enough Bitcoin. So, I mean, if you could get at a discount, then, that might be like one, a positive outcome of that scenario, maybe?
You could get it at a discount, but it would be relegated to a meme stock for the rest of your life. I mean, we're talking about 95% down. So, might not ever recover in your lifetime. At that point, do you still want to be plucking your? At
this point, I would like to point out that there is a website called Bitcoin Obituaries that has been around for quite some time, and it's not the first time Bitcoin will have died. So,
I mean, can we really say though that type of market crash is something that would never be recovered from? Like, just globally, there's been numerous instances of global scale economic meltdowns, and in the end, things still rebounded on the other side.
Okay, well, first of all, every global economic meltdown that you're referencing outside of crypto is basically just a printing event, so I think we can put those to the side. But as a practical matter, you have to at least acknowledge the significant risk that something that is literally magnitudes of order larger than anything we've ever seen before may actually have the potential to kill us, just from a press perspective, just from a confidence perspective. Also, this would be the first time that the reason the hack happens is because the network failed, not because somebody was mismanaging keys. The network failed. Elliptic curve cryptography itself would be failing. That is a completely different scenario than some, Mount Gox
I would
or
make
whatever.
the argument that Bitcoin would continue to work as designed, even though there is a side channel attack to elliptic curve cryptography. It would still be operating according to how the software was built. It wouldn't be a network failure necessarily, more than just like a side channel attack.
The network was built under the assumption that you cannot guess someone's private keys.
That's
correct. The assumption that would be broken in this situation. All of a sudden, private keys would be functionally guessable.
Well, I mean, and I'm sorry to keep picking on you so much, Isabel, but
I'm ready. Let's fucking go.
But like the network does support multiple address script types that are hashed and do not reveal the public key until you actually go to spend it. I would argue that this absolutely is an issue of poor user security and key hygiene, because every user on the network, unless they have a particular need to use a raw public key script type such as Taproot, has the ability to use a hashed script type to not reuse their addresses, and at least until they go to spend their coins, ensure they are protected.
I mean, by that logic, we should burn every P2PK coin, right? Because what you're basically saying is that P2PK coins are not, functionally working on the network because they're not hashed.
I just love the implied Shinobi quote that Satoshi was a poor Bitcoin user.
Or it could have been intentional. Who knows? Yeah.
Satoshi did a lot of very stupid things in how he built things.
But yeah. So the point is getting back to the bigger thing for me is if we do confiscate, or if we do leave everything open for liquidation, we will have no idea the progress of quantum-related keys are as it progresses. That's my problem, is in both scenarios, if in the absent credible threat of a quantum computer being executed, nobody's going to change what they're doing. What Hourglass gives us is kind of a warning system. Hey, this shit's going on. Hey, they're getting faster. They're doing more of these. Hey, maybe we should move our fucking keys. Maybe we should change our stuff.
All right. Well, we're kind of coming to the last 3 minutes here. I think that was a good kind of closing point for you, Mike. I guess, Isabel, do you want to go, and then Hunter kind of make your last defense of your position?
I was going to say, I just generally think that everyone's going to come to their senses on this, like, at some point, and anyone who's, like, kind of for some weird ideological reason being like, no, we can't burn coins, for some sort of, like, religious fervor will, like, ultimately come to their senses when they're staring down the barrel of a gun, and they realize that their entire life savings and the generational wealth that they've accrued for their children is about to become completely null and void.
I would just say that if there is a liquidation event of this kind, it would create sort of an inflation in the supply in the markets, but the inflation would be transitory.
Transitory in like a scope of 100 years. Who's going to be alive then? Not me.
Who wants cheap Bitcoin?
Well, I guess, I think all of you actually made some pretty solid arguments throughout all of this, but I have to say, most likely we won't have to worry about any of this, because I haven't ever seen any unicorns riding rainbows in my lifetime. Have you?
Hey, well, you know what? Go ahead, keep reusing your addresses.
Well, thanks a lot for asking me to moderate, Isabel, and thanks a lot for speaking, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
We actually have time for one question before you leave the stage.
We have a question.
Just one.
Isabel, question.
So just a quick question. Is this a good time to even talk about this? Because maybe the decision will be made in a couple of decades, and whoever needs to make this decision is in high school, chilling at daycare. Why are we arguing now?
Well, we have to be prepared for when it does happen, because we have no idea the time frame under which it could. There could be breakthroughs. We don't know. Nobody knows when or if a quantum computer threat could arise. For all we know, the NSA already has one. I doubt it, but it's possible.
Yeah, do you want to also talk Also, I think something to keep in mind, and I generally agree. I don't think this is something we need to be like super worried about right now. But like when we are thinking about prepping for this, we should all just sort of keep in mind the incredibly like long time frames that soft forks typically take. This would be like a particularly complex and contentious soft fork. So we're talking about a matter of years. And again, the bigger Bitcoin grows, the longer these soft fork timelines, take. I mean, like we're rapidly moving towards ossification. So, just keep that in mind.
Ultimately, Bitcoin is anti-fragile, and So, in my opinion, we'll just see where the chips fall where they may. Maybe.
Just do the work to prepare. Like have a migration scheme. Like start thinking about post-quantum crypto schemes. But other than that, like I don't see a rush to take any of this seriously yet at all. This is just let's plan ahead a little bit.
It doesn't hurt it to be prepared, not scared, though.